in this lesson, we'll create the pads for the interior of the helmet. So we have the helmet shell. We now need to create the pads for the inside. And to do that, we're going to be using the geometry that we've already created. So with the shell selected, I'm going to go down to a polygon subobject selection. And I'm going to concentrate my efforts of selecting here on one side of the helmet, on one side of the axis. And we'll see why that is in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and select any areas where I want a pad to be. And the polygons that I select don't have to really define the shape of the pad that well. It just needs to be the area where we want that pad to be. Okay, so we'll go ahead and bring this maybe across here on the bottom. Okay, maybe bring this out right up here, again stopping at the midpoint, and maybe across here. And you don't have to be too exact here with where you want your pads to be. Maybe go ahead and select these, so we get maybe something more like that. Okay, so now to actually mirror the selection over to the other side and add the polygons on that side, we're going to go to the selection tab here. And the local axis for this helmet is actually the z-axis. So it looks like the x for the world, but the local axis here is actually z. So because of the way that we drew out the cylinder. So in that case, we're going to go to select by symmetry, and we're going to select z. Okay, and that will actually create the selection over on the other side. So once we have that selected, we'll go back to here, and we want to go to geometry, and we want to detach. Okay, so we'll go ahead and detach. We can either detach this to a separate element, detach it as a clone, or just detach it. We want to actually detach it as a clone because we want to leave this geometry on the helmet. We just want to add to it. So we're going to detach as a clone, and we could call this something like pads, and we'll say OK to that. Alright, now we'll go back to object mode, and now when we select this and go ahead and isolate this using Alt-Q, you can see that we now have these polygons here, which we can use as our pads. So now we need to kind of better define the shapes and cut any of these apart that we want. You can see we've got a couple of extra polygons that we had. We weren't too careful about selecting things on the back, so we can go ahead and delete those. Same thing over here, just kind of clean everything up a bit. Alright, and this is all one piece of geometry here. Okay, so if we want to go ahead and cut this up, there are a few different ways that we can do this. Okay, so let's say that we want to come in here and go ahead and start to cut this apart. Let me move this out of the way here. So we can go ahead and go back to our object mode, and let's say we want to cut this down maybe into 4 pieces or so. So go ahead and use Swift Loop to just kind of add some edge loops in there. Go back to Polygon and go back in and start to cut some of these pieces apart. Okay, so we've still got pieces that kind of match up shape-wise, but we're just sort of cutting those apart. We can do the same thing over here. Let's say we want to go ahead and select all these polygons, and let's do an inset. Okay, and now we can go ahead and just get rid of all of these polygons out here. Okay, kind of clean that up a little bit. Alright, we can go ahead and kind of tweak the shape if we want to, so we make this a little bit more of a round shape. Okay, same thing up here. Maybe kind of bring this up. Just do a little bit of shaping there. Kind of pull that back into so it's a little bit more planar. Same thing here. So we can add a little bit of shape to these guys. We also need to add some resolution so that when we add our thickness, it's not going to be just a round circle as it would be in this case. So again, we'll go back to Swift Loop, and we're just going to add some loops just real quickly to add that resolution in here. You can see how quickly you can go through and do this, and you don't want it to be too too tight. There we go. And we'll pull that down and then do the same thing over here. Alright, so just cut those apart as you will. And then to add the thickness to this, let's go ahead and just add our shell modifier. Go all the way down here to add our shell. And let's do an inner amount. And in this case, we actually want to do an outer amount because of the nature of the polygons that we have. Since they're facing in, we actually want to do an outer amount, which will push it to the inside of the helmet. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add the thickness for the pads themselves. Okay. And if you want to, you can go back down and add any of those edge loops that you want to on any of these pieces. Come in here and kind of square those out. If you don't do that, when you go to smooth those, they will have very rounded corners, which may be what you want, but you want to have control over that. Okay? And then you've got your shell. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here while I finish up just cutting these down and adding that resolution, and then we'll come back in with that shell added to the geometry on the other side as well. Okay, so I'll be back in just a second. All right, so now we've got the pads with some thickness. We've got them shaped a little bit. One thing that we do want to take care of is to probably get rid of some of the polygons out here. So we'll first go ahead and just convert this down by collapsing the stack. Okay, we'll convert this to an editable poly. And once we've got that, we can come in and select these polygons. Maybe grow that selection. And then we can get rid of any of those polygons that are going to be attached to the helmet itself. Okay, so we can go ahead and just delete all of those different polygons. Go ahead and select these. And we'll just grow the selection and go ahead and delete those. Alright, so at this point, once you get all those deleted, then we can actually just smooth those out and you can get a preview of what those are going to look like. If it's a little bit too soft, for instance right here, you can just add another edge loop. But let me go ahead and exit isolate mode, and then you can see that on top of the helmet that we have here. And you can see the pads, and you can make any sort of configuration you want to inside there. But now we have that those pieces of geometry. So finish that up, and then in the next lesson what we're going to do is go ahead and start to add the face mask. And we'll do that using some splines. So we'll go ahead and do that next.